All right, welcome back to Senate Judiciary. We are continuing our discussion of House Bill 172. Let's go ahead and take roll, and then I'll explain how we're going to proceed.
Senator Crago,
Here.
Senator Crum,
Here.
Senator Hicks,
Outside the door,
Senator Kolb,
also outside the door.
Chairman Olson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay. All right, so we left off taking public comment on House Bill 172. If you've already commented, you had your shot, so we're not going to bring you back up if you've already commented. So of those in the audience, go ahead and raise your hand and let me know if you plan on testifying. Okay, so what we're going to do is limit testimony to 2 minutes because I do have a significant handful of people online as well who want to testify. And so we're going to take about an hour's worth of testimony. I estimate about 30 minutes in the room and 30 minutes online is probably what it will amount to. And then that will give us time to work the bill. So we left off with Ms. Russell and Mr. Carenti, and that's where we'll start. Come on up. And Pierre, will you run a timer? Who's going first? Ms. Russell? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and committee, thank you. Kathy Russell with the Wyoming Republican Party. With regard to self-defense in this particular bill of gun-free zones, repealing gun-free zones, we have 2 out of 9 of our legislative priorities for this year involve this topic, as well as 3 of our 21 planks and 3 resolutions at a minimum. So I can safely say that the Republicans of the state feel that this is a very important bill for a number of reasons. One of them is self-defense. I think many of us have been in a situation where we were told or advised to carry a handgun, whether it's because you're out in the wild of I-80 or you're in the wild of our wildlife areas, or the police are too far away or the sheriffs are too far away to help you. I personally have been given that advice to carry a handgun because the police would not be able to get to me soon enough in a difficult situation. That was a police evaluation of the workplace. We hear a lot about taking care of our children and taking care of their safety, especially in the schools, and yet this is primary. This is defense of life. We have to be able to meet force with force. I had the unfortunate opportunity of being in the proximity of Columbine when it happened. We were put on lockdown because of our proximity to the school at my place of business. Some years later, my children were in school in Bailey when another 7 young women were taken hostage and held for a number of hours before the negotiations resulted in 6 of the 7 being released, 1 at a time, but not before they had been sexually assaulted. The last one, however, was shot. My grandchildren were in the neighboring school. They were in lockdown. Nobody knew what was going to happen. A study was done of that particular event.
Ms. Russell, that's 2 minutes. You only had 2 minutes.
Did you say time?
Yeah,
I am so sorry.
just go ahead and wrap it up. You're fine.
Thank you. Just please consider this bill. It's critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carenti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joey Carenti. I'll be testifying today as a retired member of the Uniformed Service of the United States, small arms specialist and unit armorer. All the stories you've heard, all the stories you will hear, maybe anecdotal, maybe true, but they all relate to situations that are already crimes in Wyoming, from murder, assault with a deadly weapon, all the way down to reckless endangerment, pointing a firearm at somebody, whether you believe it to be loaded or not, already a crime in Wyoming. We can already prosecute any of the things that will come out of a situation where people have guns on them in most areas already. The concept of it doesn't work when you take the guns away from the good guys is a big deal to me. And I'll take you back to November 5th, 2009, and the mass shooting that took place at Fort Hood, where 13 were murdered and 30 were injured by another member of the Uniformed Services. The reason that happened is because on that base, uniformed service members who are trained and licensed and practiced in the profession of arms were not allowed to carry weapons. Good guys need to have their guns. And I'm not going to try to make this sound like, oh, I was there in that room when it happened. I was on the other side of the base and they didn't have their guns because I did. And I don't know if it's guilt fighting grief, but there are worse situations than having something that's already illegal and happening. We're going to make it more illegaler to kill people, and that's going to stop it. We're going to make it more illegaler to shoot people. It's going to stop it. We need to have people that can make that choice, whether they want to carry their firearms protected under the Constitution if they want to. We could stop misinformation by abolishing freedom of speech. We could save a ton of money and speed up court processes by getting rid of the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th Amendment, or just ignoring it in a reasonable and necessary fashion. But we don't govern from positions of convenience or fear. So in looking at this, no matter what you've heard so far or what you're going to hear the rest of the day, I ask that you consider your oath and look at the Constitution and what already exists in law.
Thank you. Next. Okay.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Reese Robertson. I'm a student at the University of Wyoming, and I'm also the Vice President of Turning Point USA at the University of Wyoming. And I'll try and keep it very short, and I won't use any like facts or like statistic or data or like a whole lot of legal arguments against this, mainly because I feel like the opposition to this bill is all derivative from fear. And I feel like that is a principle that we should not be basing all of our legal decisions off of. And the one, I guess I'll go back, I'll say the one stat that I would like to propose to everybody is Wyoming has been the second highest gun ownership state in the country for many, many years. It has been a consistent part of Wyoming culture to own and to bear firearms. And I feel like every person who opposes this bill, they walk around the state of Wyoming perfectly fine. Like, I don't think any of us here would fear like we're gonna get shot if we just walk across down Central Avenue because of like, you know, it's not a legitimate fear. And I don't understand how anybody can say that if we allow weapons to be concealed carried on these public spaces, then all of a sudden there's a great fear or danger that's imminent. I'm like, well, if that's the case, then why don't you feel like you're in danger and fear of your life all the time in the rest of Wyoming? I feel like everyone here knows that. Everyone owns firearms, a lot of people carry, and it's not a concern for the rest of the state. But as soon as it comes onto a school or a campus, where most likely the people who are carrying train and get their permit and actually take defending each other seriously, I don't understand how we can view that as any different than carrying anywhere else. And I guess one last point I would like to make is that, let's say you're on like at the dorms and you go across the street of Grand Avenue to Subway, for instance, where I'm assuming as long as they don't prohibit the carrying of firearms because they're a private business, people can carry in there, students can.
Time.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I would appreciate you guys voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Gabe Saint, and I'm the president of Turning Point USA at UW. I take a philosophical approach with this issue since data seems to go over folks' heads since emotions dominate conversations about guns. Our culture is one driven by fear. I think that is evident by the testimony given by those opposed to this piece of legislation. Fear, being one of the most powerful human emotions, was something the founders and framers were acutely aware of when founding this great nation. Many of them spoke about how fear is a weapon utilized by oppressive governments and mobs to subjugate peoples. They were proven right during the 20th century as we saw totalitarian and mob-driven regimes use fear to control and oppress entire populations. Our forefathers taught us that fear should never be an inspiration in passing or not passing laws, unless, of course, that fear is a fear of God. Gun-free zones, however, do not represent a fear of God. It is a regulation that essentially suspends Second Amendment rights on public grounds designated as gun-free zones, where, by the way, inalienable rights should never be suspended. This fear of guns and evil people who wield them strips the rights of those who intend to use guns for righteous purposes, like protecting life and property. Gun-free zones do not uphold what is true, good, and beautiful. I could sit here and spout loads of data about how guns on campus pose a minimal threat to others, but that data will inevitably be excused by those here today who use fear to dissuade you, our good representatives, from repealing gun-free zones. The rights of my fellow citizens and I do not cease to exist when others feel uncomfortable. The definition of liberty is the ability to do what one ought to do or to pursue virtue. Where is the virtue in stripping people's rights to defend themselves, their property, and the people around them? The purpose of this government is to protect the people from burdensome regulations that do not uphold God's justice or His standards of beauty, goodness, and truth. Members of the committee, please consider the fundamentals of American governance when you decide on this piece of legislation. Will we be a society governed by fear, or will we have liberty? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mullen.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. First, I want to extend my deep appreciation for you all taking the time on this bill. We've seen many committees this session where we've been hurried through, and I really do appreciate the committee's willingness to let the voices be heard. That being said, this is a policy decision that you are all going to have to make. The first question should always be, can we? Is this a policy decision that we can make? And I do want to read from you the District of Columbia, Heller, the Antonin Scalia, his majority opinion. Like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. I want to repeat that. It is not unlimited. The court's opinion should not be taken to cast doubt on longstanding prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings. So we've answered, can we, both in the affirmative and the negative? Yes, we have the ability to restrict those guns in those sensitive areas. Should we? That question needs to be asked. And again, this is the policy decision here for you all today. The data is clear. The law study is junk science. It has not held up to peer review. However, what we have are decades of peer-reviewed studies that do stand up that show there is a direct and significant positive correlation to the number of guns owned versus those homicide deaths. Now, you are going to make a trade-off. It is security versus freedom. When I used to teach political science, this was always the opener to the courses. These are the decisions that you have to make. Security versus freedom. It is a trade-off. It is not a bonus here and a bonus there. That being said, a couple of things. I'd like to make some proposed amendments. We obviously like the idea of maintaining local control. If there was language added that said districts may adopt policies, that would allow for local control. The Second Amendment, or the other amendment I would propose is that students not be allowed to carry. So this was language that was in last year's bill. 18 and 19-year-old students should not be allowed to carry in their school or go to another school and carry. Athletic events, I've had a number of coaches reach out with concerns.
Do we have your amendments in writing by chance?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that is time, so we've got them.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Kirk Schmidt. I live in Lander. I'm retired now, but for 38 years I worked in the public school system. I was a finance director and I was also in charge of facilities, so security was part of my job. There's a couple of things that need clarified from previous testimony. School resource officers are not security guards. There was statements made that they'd be the first person of defense coming into a building. Well, in all of your school buildings in your districts, that's just simply not the case. Schools around the state do not have SROs full-time in every building. It's just not physically possible. So that needs to be understood. And like the previous speaker, I was involved in witnessing a lot of highly charged events that happen in school districts. Go to a school board hearing where they're expelling a student sometime, sit in a principal's office, go to a basketball game, go to a wrestling match. There's a lot of places where there are emotionally charged people who would make me very nervous if I was officiating that event or if I was just a participant. So to think that doing that is going to get rid of that emotion, that's not true. There are a lot of places that do not allow guns. Denver Children's Hospital, National Finals Rodeo, all professional sports venues, they don't allow it. I am very concerned about the loss of local control that's happened over the last several years in our state. It was interesting reading candidates in the last election that talked about government overreach from the federal government to Wyoming. And I think everybody in Wyoming agrees with that. I mean, there's too much government overreach. But the problem we're running into at the state level is the government overreach and the lack of local control, the legislature down to the locally elected officials. They're elected, they are not appointed. There was a statement made 2 years ago by the current chairman of the Freedom Caucus. She said she believes in local control. It has its limits, that local government is merely
Sir,
a
that is
public
time.
subdivision of the state.
Sir, that's time.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Burt?
Good morning. I'm going to be very brief. I'm representing the Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault this morning. We don't oppose or support this bill, but we do want to point out a couple of issues of concern. One of the first issues, and maybe the most important, is that access to a firearm makes it 5 times more likely that a woman will be killed by her abusive partner. And that's in every situation. That's 5 times greater when there's a firearm involved. There are concerns about the issues in terms of community centers and activities where victims and survivors have been able to go and feel safe in those situations because their abusers were not allowed in there with firearms. That is a concern at this point in time. And I would like to reiterate the statistics that are very clear now. We keep hearing 94% and 98% of public shootings occur in gun-free zones. I want to refer you to the most recent research, which is a peer review and well-accepted research from the Lancet, who says, and they found that such shootings are more likely to occur in areas that allow firearms and in those that don't. And other research has found that only 10 to 20% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. So those statistics have been widely, and I think it's already been mentioned, widely debunked in terms of firearms and soft targets in gun-free zones. So any questions?
All right,
Thank you, committee.
Let's go over here.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Leonard Mosher. I was 8 years on Laramie County 1 School District Board here. That was when Columbine happened down there in Denver. We had a lot of meetings and everything trying to figure out what happened down there, how we could adjust so it didn't happen here in Cheyenne. One of the things we learned down there is those 2 students more or less had their weapons and they were just walking classroom, shooting people at will, whatever, until they were stopped. A lot of the victims did die because they would have lived if they had medical health, but nobody was there to give them medical help or treatment because they all bled to death. And so I firmly believe that there has to be some kind of way to stop these people. You're not going to stop a crazy going into a school or into a building, but you can at least stop some of the damage or slow them down or whatever. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Mr. Brown?
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. My name is Exie Brown. I'm a resident here in Cheyenne. 8 of my 22 years of service in the Air Force, I spent in security and law enforcement. I have a degree in criminal justice and a minor in pre-law. First and foremost, gun-free zones and anti-gun laws violate the Second Amendment, as the Second Amendment states, shall not be infringed. It affects law-abiding gun owners, not criminals, because the majority of all gun-related crimes are premeditated, and all the mass shootings are premeditated. No law, no sign that says gun-free zone is going to deter a criminal when they have made up their mind to conduct a heinous act. According to the Crime Prevention Research Center in a recent study, 97.8% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. Why? Because they are soft targets and they garner these criminals the most publicity for their cause and for their message. These signs and these laws do not deter criminals. Why does Wyoming have one of the lowest violent crime rates or gun rates in the nation? It is because criminals know that if they go anywhere that allow firearms, there is a chance that they are going to encounter a law-abiding citizen carrying a firearm, and they will not meet their objectives. And this does increase security because it will deter criminals from hitting our schools and our public facilities, knowing that they will face an armed, law-abiding citizen. So I urge you to pass this bill as written without amendment. Thank you.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'd like to kind of take it away, this bill, on and for it, against schools, but bring it to us. My first year in the House and my first year in the Senate, I was just overwhelmed by the number of phone calls, email threats, letters from all over, believe it or not, the world against me and threatening me. And there was really nothing I could do. I did ask if I could carry some type of weapon, and I was given that right, but it was a weapon that probably could have caused me more harm if I used it instead of having a firearm. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'd like you to think about us and how we are sometimes soft targets here in the legislature. People can be very cruel when they don't understand what's going on with our votes. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go over here.
Chairman Olson, committee, thank you very much. My name is Jeff Barnes. First, I'd like to start off by just briefly telling you I've got 30 years of law enforcement, 32 years of military service, 3 years that I've served in Iraq and Afghanistan on a military contract with the 101st and 82nd Airborne. Spent 5 years as a sheriff's deputy here in Laramie County, and I have a master's degree in security management. First, I'd like to say is our response time. When I was a rural deputy covering all 2,600 square miles of Laramie County, I was the only deputy out there. My response time was significant. If I got a call when I was in Pine Bluffs to Kurt Gowdy, nobody else would pick that call up. I had to do that. So response time is significantly important. There is not enough law enforcement out there to protect each and every citizen in this country. And my comment is, what good is a concealed carry permit if we're not allowed to carry? So with House Bill 0172, I agree with all the restrictions that you have added in there, and training is certainly significant. People that carry a firearm need to be very proficient with that. When I encounter a person who is in favor of gun-free zones, I simply ask them, why not post crime-free zones signs instead? And the best answer I always get is, well, that doesn't work. Well, it's the same thing with gun-free zones. Posting the sign does not work. The criminals don't care. The solution to crime control, the simplest solution is crime control is enforcing the existing laws aimed at criminals who carry and use firearms to commit their crimes. And I can tell you, after over 20 years with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, our prosecutors and them, they do not prosecute criminals that carry weapons. And if you're lucky to get it on the federal level, then they will do a 10-year maximum sentence. So I would ask you to vote in favor of getting rid of these crime-free zones. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jump over here.
Working on that green. Good morning, or now afternoon, I guess, Mr. Chair, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Brian Gosh. I'm a lawyer and registered lobbyist with the National Rifle Association. Here today testify in favor of House Bill 172. Whether you want to believe the statistics or not, or the studies that were cited, just look at the headlines out there. Vegas, Parkland, all over the country. You can see where these mass shootings are taking place. They're in gun-free zones, places where the law-abiding citizens follows the law. Like we are today, we're not carrying because we're following the law. You can't carry in the Capitol here like you can in my other states where I work. I can carry in the Capitol, but I can't carry here. So I don't, because that's what the law says. If you take a look at what happened in 2007 on the campus of Virginia Tech, a madman does a mass shooting. He starts in the dorm where he kills 2 people, then takes it to a classroom where he kills 30 others. Wounds 17, and 6 students were wounded jumping out the windows. Now, of the 55 casualties, I would venture to guess that all of them wish there had been an armed guard, or that they or their classmates had been carrying a firearm that day to help protect them and their fellow students. Unfortunately, there was not anybody there. This madman then took his own life, and that's how the violence ended. I could give you more stories. There have been church shootings, previously down in Texas. They banned guns in churches. 32 people died that day from a mass shooting. They then passed the law, changed it to where you could carry in a church. 2 years later, a mass shooting began, but an armed parishioner ended it with one shot. Gun-free zones don't work. Recently in South Dakota, they just passed campus carry out of the Senate, 33-2. That did include a provision to allow carrying in the dorms. It also had a safe storage provision like similar to this bill has. But there you can see the momentum is to pass a college campus carry bill as well, and it includes carrying in the dorms. So with that, I will stand by for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gosh. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Travis Couture-Lovelady with the National Rifle Association. I'm a former member of the Kansas House of Representatives, still reside there in Hays, Kansas. So just a short drive up here. Just wanted to give you some perspective from not only the other states I work in, but especially Kansas. In 2012, Kansas passed the Public Building Security Act, which said all government buildings could not deny carry unless they had security. Metal detectors, armed guards, those kinds of things that do more than just a gun-free zone sticker that show that there is some certainty that people will not be carrying there besides just the folks that choose to follow the law. There was a 4-year transitionary period supposedly for the folks to get ready and create plans. They spent most of those 4 years trying to find ways to get out of it and try to get it repealed. But it did go into effect 4 years later, and we've had almost a decade now with no incidents on college campuses. We heard all the doom and gloom, everything you can think of. I'm sure all the things you're hearing today and as you discuss this issue, but there has not been issues on college campuses. There has been issues in class. There has been issues at basketball games, football games. Those stories, those scenarios just have not happened, and they won't happen. An armed society is a polite society. So I think this is something you guys should do, and urge you to support this bill. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. All right, next.
Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Bill Scarlett. I'm from Teton County. I'm on the school board, the Board of Trustees up there. Just got elected to my 3rd term. I appreciate the 2017 law giving schools the local opportunity to review their specific situation and be able to address it to the best of their community standards. I understand that we're trying to change that with this, but I'm going to take it to our block grant funding. Block grant has never provided funds for our safety and security. We have to figure out ways to handle this away from our block grant. We are currently in the 8th year of trying to secure construction for secure vestibules at several of our facilities to bring it up to new standards, and we still can't do that. So as we're passing this, please find it the appropriations and also the safe security storage of these biometric boxes for our potential teachers that would exercise their permit rights. We're going to have to put biometric storage boxes in every classroom, I would imagine, and that is another one of those unappropriated expenses that will take away from educating our kids. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions, committee? Yes, Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, we passed a bill that I was on last year that allowed for security training for all school districts to participate in. That was for staff and teachers, support folks. And I don't know as you participated in that, but it's available, and it still stands as it was signed into law last year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Scarlett.
Thank you, Chairman Olson. We do participate in those trainings. What we don't have is the physical, the ability to fund additional SROs and employees, and then also the physical things such as secured lock boxes. And we're still waiting to get our funding to build our secure vestibules that we've been after for 8 years.
All right, thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gillian Chapman, the superintendent in Teton County School District. I stand in opposition to this bill as it increases the risk of violence, negatively impacts mental health, and impacts the ability to recruit and to retain staff. And it disregards local control in each community. The most important components as to why I oppose this bill are related to safety, mental health, and recruitment. Wyoming has long resisted governmental overreach and has trusted the locally elected officials to make decisions that are best for their communities. Each of the 48 school district boards have this authority to allow identified and trained employees to carry concealed weapons in schools. This works well to allow school districts to consider the conditions in their communities or the specific schools and make decisions based on what is best given the local factors. I'll tell you that our staff, our students, and parents have shared their concerns about this bill with me and their level of anxiety that it's even being considered. Families have shared that they have serious concerns about sending their children to schools where concealed carry is permitted. Teachers and staff have shared the same concerns. Each community and the locally elected officials should be making this decision based on what's best for their community. Putting this in place will come with extraordinary costs to ensure the safety and well-being of students and staff, and those costs should be determined by the locally elected officials. Thank you for your consideration.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Chapman. Mr. Firmer, you didn't already testify?
No, sir.
I just see you so much, I thought you testified already. But
Mr. Chairman,
Wednesday, Friday.
Go ahead.
I will be very brief. Mr. Chairman, I just want to begin by, introducing myself, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. I join with my colleagues from the university and the community colleges in saying that our preference is for local control, local entities to make these decisions. However, I recognize that that may not be the policy decision of this legislature, that as you move forward, you may have different path that you have. We do believe that this will result in loss of some staff across our Wyoming school districts, as you just heard from the superintendent in Teton County. Some staff are concerned about this. A number of our districts have passed policies allowing authorizing staff to carry. Some of our communities have had this conversation very recently. Of those that have had the conversation very recently, some have chosen to adopt new policies, such as Converse County School District Number 1. Some have chosen against that. Mr. Chairman, I do ask two things if you move forward with this policy. Number one, ask that you do consider having explicit language in this regarding prohibition of students carrying. Understand that there is a belief that that is otherwise covered by law, but ask you to directly address that. The second thing I would ask you to consider, Mr. Chairman, is on page 5, beginning line 19 with that paragraph F. In the next 3 pages, you talk about school districts and their ability to govern employee carry. Would ask you to also consider volunteers, those individuals who are regularly in the school district, the same as an employee, just who are not receiving their compensation from the school district. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your consideration of those issues and wish you luck with this.
Any questions, committee? All right, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of School Administrators. Going to echo a few things real quickly. The superintendents for the school districts out there would prefer to continue with the current law that we have. Feel like that if there was sufficient pressure on our school boards to pass a rule or something, that those would have already passed. Do appreciate some of the work that's been done and the ability to do some things. Again, appreciate the law that was passed last year that Senator Kolb sponsored, that allowed for training and ammunition and things like that. I would ask that a little more specifically than Mr. Farmer did, if you go to page 5 and look at in line 8, I would propose an amendment there. Currently, a student can continue in school, in a K-12 school, until their 21st birthday and the end of that year. So I think there's some clear issues with that. Would like to get that cleared up.
Senator Hicks.
I thought you said page 5, line 8.
That's where I'm going to propose an amendment, sir.
All right.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
So students can stay in school until their 21st birthday and the end of the year after that. We have a lot of our severe and profound special ed students that do that. And I can tell you that I've had fifth, sixth, and seventh year students that have stayed until they're 21 and graduated. Some of them got things straightened out, some of them still haven't. So what I would propose would be on page 5, line 8, and it would be V, I think, 3 little i's, allow any student of a public K-12 school to carry a firearm at any public elementary school, secondary school, or school event. And that would be my proposal for an amendment. With that, I'm probably almost out of time, and I'll answer any questions.
Questions, committee? All right, thank you. Mr. Shannon? Oh. Yeah, it's maybe not the best place to plug that amendment in, but we do have that amendment in writing, so we can pick the right spot for it. Mr. Shannon?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Dan Shannon with the Department of Corrections. Sir, our agency is responsible for over 7,500 convicted felons. We have 5 institutions, 3 ACCs, and 24 parole offices. Our 5 institutions are protected by 68104 regarding firearms. And the bringer of the bill on page 4, line 6, added the Department of Corrections, which was supported by your co-committee chair. And I would just ask for that consideration. I'll stand for questions.
Senator Craigo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, can you clarify, are you asking us for a particular amendment or?
Mr. Shannon?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Craigo, no, I'm not asking for any form of amendment. It's already there. And I also didn't want to ask for support either. My point by saying these individuals that are in institutions, it's the same criminal justice population inside of our pro offices. So, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Next.
And I thought we had 3 minutes, so I really cut mine down. And so I hope it makes sense. I do appreciate that many citizens wish to conceal carry in order to protect themselves and others. And concealed carry provides for them the element of safety they desire. But what about the citizens who strongly, very strongly believe that their safety is diminished when people are concealed carrying? Many people feel that the more guns, the more issues there are with problems, that of accidental shooting and injury and death. And I feel like this bill asks you to choose one group of people over the other. And I'm particularly concerned as a retired educator with guns in schools. I know that children, when we considered, Campbell County, when considered having guns in schools, one person being designated, kids found out about that. And they're really scared when they find out that people in their school have guns. And I know on one side of the story, they say it makes it safer, but emotionally for children, it doesn't make it safer. So I guess I'm asking you to not choose one group of citizens over another group of citizens and not repeal the safety-free gun zones that we have now. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Any questions, committee? All right, thank you. Anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Okay, not too bad. We're 4 minutes ahead of schedule. We will go to online testimony. And have you already admitted somebody? Yes, go ahead. Welcome, Mr. Lott.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate Senator Steinmetz inviting me to testify. Given that my name has been mentioned by at least 5 people in the testimony last week and today, I just thought I'd tell you who I am a little bit. I'm president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. I've held academic and teaching positions at Stanford, University of Chicago, the Wharton Business School, UCLA, Yale, Rice. I was chief economist for the United States Sentencing Commission in Washington. And more recently, I was senior advisor for research and statistics in the Department of Justice. Several times people have questioned whether my research is peer-reviewed. I've published over 120 peer-reviewed academic journal articles. My book, More Guns, Less Crime, was published by the University of Chicago Press and went through refereeing 3 different times. Just to get to the main point here, anybody who reads the diaries and manifestos for these mass murderers know that time after time they explicitly talk about why they picked the targets that they did. And overwhelmingly, they explicitly say they want to avoid places where they know their victims might be able to go and defend themselves. You can look at the Nashville Covenant school shooter. In her diary, she talks about 3 different places that she considered before the school, and she turned down each of those because she was worried that people were carrying guns there and would stop her. You look at the 2022 supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York. In his manifesto, he said, quote, areas where CCW permits are outlawed or prohibited are good areas of attack. One number that's been brought up several times by other witnesses has been the 94% of the attacks occurring in gun-free zones. What people have to understand is that there are different definitions for this. The definition that I use and is based for the 94% is the FBI definition of an active shooting case. These are attacks that occur in public places that do not involve some other type of crime like a gang fight over drug turf or a robbery. When people point to different types of numbers, which are much lower, they're overwhelmingly involving gang fights over drug turf. Are gang fights over drug turf important? Yes, they are. But the causes and solutions, yes.
That is time.
Okay, I was told maybe I would be, since I was been attacked so many times, I might have a little bit more time than that, or not.
Maybe we'd give you 2 minutes for each time your name was mentioned, and no. Unfortunately, everybody just gets 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Lott. If there is something that you want to submit to us in writing by email, you can certainly do that. If there's more information that you want to share with us, we'd be happy to have it.
Thanks.
All right, next. All right.
Hello, is it my turn?
Sure is. Welcome.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you, committee, for letting me talk. And I think I don't have too much more to add. I think there's been a lot of people that have already mentioned quite a few things about this. Yes.
Start with your name.
Oh, hi. Sorry. I'm new to this. My name is Tom Jajits. I am a resident of Laramie, so just down the road. Again, I would like to say thank you for allowing me to talk to the committee, and I am very much against this bill. I think a lot of people have brought up very good points, so I will not use my time to bring those up again. However, I did want to ask the committee, in light of parents, educators, university students, and all of these people that have testified so far have brought up how they would like to see local control on this, and they would like to have individuals that are in the community make the decision for the community. What other things can we bring up to the committee to persuade you to not allow this legislation to move on? So that is my question to you. Thank you.
Any questions, committee? All right, thank you for your testimony. Who's next? Mr. Carmichael.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. Don't know if that's intentional or not.
It's not, but I don't really care about that. Anyway, uh, good afternoon, Chairman and committee. It's going to be kind of disjointed because I'm trying to cut a bunch of it out. So I'll just jump in here. Opponents to this bill apparently believe that HB 172 would result in a whole new class of dangerous, evil people who didn't previously exist, but will now suddenly be a dangerous threat. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of CCW permit holders who exercise their right to carry concealed every day and are not a threat to anyone. They are simply prepared to defend themselves. They're around kids, adults, people of differing religious beliefs, political opponents, business competitors, etc., and they do not threaten, attack, or endanger any of these people. They are simply prepared to defend themselves, their family, loved ones, or innocent victims. When bad people attack our schools, the obvious response is to call law enforcement with guns to intervene. The guns are the necessary quotient to effectively respond to a violent criminal who, for whatever reason, is intent on murder and mayhem against innocent victims. In the absence of law enforcement, why would good people with a gun be prohibited or discouraged? It makes no sense. Of course, we all hope that law enforcement is always close enough and able to intervene in time, but that is unrealistic. I'm going to skip some stuff here. I'm going to go right to this. Local agency or government entity does not have or should not have any authority over the Second Amendment or my right to defend myself or my family. Gun-free zones are unconstitutional as well as misguided and counterproductive. Law-abiding citizens that have the necessary permit should be allowed to exercise their Second Amendment right to protect themselves, loved ones, and innocents. And as the Federal Gun-Free Zone Act allows for. In summary, it is my firm belief that gun-free zone signs currently displayed that invite tragedy and disaster at schools should be replaced with new ones. The new ones should say in bold letters, "This is not a gun-free zone. Armed, prepared personnel present at all times." Please stop protecting our children from their qualified, law-abiding family, concerned friends and neighbors, and good people in general who are willing and prepared to do that. Instead, make a meaningful change that will protect our children from the mentally ill or just plain evil people who have been. Yes, sir.
Aye. Yep, that's your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Charlie J. Jeets. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the time to testify today. I am opposed to this bill, and I wanted to explain a little bit about why. All due respect to previous folks giving testimony, I am not afraid of guns. I've grown up in Wyoming my entire life. They've been around my entire life. I'm not afraid of guns. However, I have a first grader and a toddler in childcare, and hearing again and again that the most likely occurrence with a gun in a child's place of school or care is an accidental discharge fills me with concern for my children's safety. Having been in my son's classroom and a presence in my own daughter's classroom, I can tell you that the environment is not particularly conducive to strong and good decision making. Not only that, we continue to hear that folks who will be carrying will be the teachers in classrooms and administrators in schools, and that may be, but that leaves out a whole other category of folks who come into schools, who are perhaps delivery folks, people bringing the milk for lunch that day, people bringing DoorDash into our schools. Those folks might care about our kids and they might not. I think that there are not very many good reasons to bring the presence of guns in our classrooms and our schools from 0 to some, because that increases the risk of accidental discharge, even by very responsible individuals, from none to any. And as a parent, that just seems unnecessary. And as a longtime educator, it doesn't particularly feel effective to me. Thank you.
Any questions, committee? All right, thank you, and thank you for keeping your
I
comments.
appreciate it.
Minutes. Okay.
Hello, senators, can you hear me? I'm trying to change my setting to visual.
Yep, we can hear you. We just can't see you.
Okay, I will work on that while I'm speaking. I am sorry, my husband is driving me home from lunch for lunch. So okay, I think I've got it now. I apologize. My name is Ashley Russo and I'm a Laramie County resident, and it is still not letting me change my settings. I am so sorry. Okay, I will just speak so that I don't waste my 2 minutes. I'm a Laramie County resident and educator, and I stand in opposition of this bill. Thank you for continuing to take public comment of repealing gun-free school zones. I emailed you all this, but for the record, this bill frightens me as an educator. My classroom has 3 escapes. My classroom has safety measures on where I take my students in the event of an active shooter. But this plan only happens if we can see the weapon. Concealed carry is exactly that. Concealed, covered, guarded.
Did we lose her? We lost her, Pierre? Okay, well, we'll see if she comes back. If she does come back, we'll let her back in. And let's go to Mr. Dorr.
I believe, I'm sorry, it cut me off.
Yep, go ahead. You're fine.
Possible for me to, I'm so sorry. I am not driving, my husband was driving. So I speak in opposition of this bill. Thank you for continuing to take public comment. As I said before I got disconnected, my classroom has 3 escapes. The safety measures are in place for where I take my students in the event of an active shooter drill. That's if we can see the weapon. Concealed carry is covered, guarded, and protected, leaving us without a safety plan in place. I'm a 2005 graduate, which means that I began my middle school years in a post-Columbine world. I'm not anti-gun, as I mentioned in my emails and messages to you all. I'm anti-gun in my schools, at sporting events, in your legislative house, and even in the line for the pancake breakfast at Frontier Days. Would Frontier Days also be a covered event in this process? Wyoming has spoken numerous times in reference to this bill and bills like it. Wyoming doesn't want it. It's concerning on many levels, including that people cannot ask if someone is carrying into the gun-free areas. On Thursday, this was also challenged with the ideas of airports, which is a federal mandate. As an educator, I'm asking you to please vote no to send this bill to the floor. Thank you for hearing my public comment today. I apologize for the problems with my audio and my video, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions, committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just to answer your question, Ms. Rousseau, if you're still listening, Cheyenne Frontier Days is a private organization and this bill doesn't touch private organizations, so it would not. Mr. Dorr.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Aaron Dorr on behalf of the members of Wyoming gun owners. Our members are in full support of HB 172. We'd ask you to advance it as quickly as possible. As I think everyone here knows, it's been an ongoing issue for quite some time. We had this bill first introduced by then Representative Bo Biteman in 2017, only to have Governor Meade veto that bill. And of course, upgraded version was vetoed last year by Governor Gordon. We hope to finish this year. For our members, Mr. Chair, this is a very simple issue. So-called gun-free zones are deadly, and we've seen this time after time where bad guys attack so-called gun-free zones because our members can't fight back. This bill gives our members a chance to defend themselves in areas they can't do so currently. As I think you all know, this bill does not force private property owners to allow for concealed carry. It simply applies to public places where our members fund with their tax dollars the state capitol, other public buildings and schools. It gives our members a chance to defend themselves against violent predators in these areas. I know I'm pressed for time. Very briefly on some objections. Some claim this bill violates the spirit of local control, but we would argue that all levels of government exist to defend freedom. That's what this bill would do. Others claim the bill would lead to additional acts of random violence or shootings. We've heard this since WIGO was first formed. When we passed constitutional carry in 2011, we heard this. It didn't happen. When we passed stand your ground law in 2018, we heard this. It didn't happen. When we banned red flag laws last year, we heard this, and it didn't happen. The sky didn't fall then, and it's not going to fall when Wyoming finally repeals deadly gun-free zones. Our members are in full support of this bill. We hope you advance it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Questions, committee? All right, thank you, Mr. Dorr.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Solto.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Solto. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for your time and thank you for extending the opportunity for testimony. I'm speaking today as a Wyoming certified teacher and as a mother of two. I have a few quick points of opposition to this bill, and I ask you to consider voting no on this and resuming local control around this really important issue. My first point of concern is teacher retention. As a teacher, this dramatically impacts whether I will continue teaching or not. I think that we have a huge voice missing from this conversation today, last week, and before, and that is of the teachers and the students. So I asked you before moving forward on this to seek out that input and those concerns and voices. Secondly, in the research I found, school crime is negligible in our state. How blessed are we in that regard? And to have the argument that we need to protect ourselves in school, our history does not illustrate that, and the crime rates that we have are not they don't push this argument forward. But what we do know in our state is that we have high suicide rates. And overwhelming evidence shows that firearm access is associated with increased suicide, homicide, unintentional firearm deaths, and injuries. So I'm also concerned, as others have said, about accidental shootings. The other component that concerns me is how this might take away from teacher trainings. While our professional development should be focused on student impact and how we can increase our teaching background. And I would hate to lose time for teacher education in this regard. So I ask that you consider sticking with local control around this important issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Solto. Any questions, committee? All right, thank you. Who's next? Okay. Welcome, Ms. Slater.
Hi, thank you very much. Sorry, I was listed as Laura. My link wasn't working. Mr. Chairman and committee members, my name is Megan Slater and I'm from Teton County and I am in opposition of House Bill 172. I speak to you today as a former elementary school teacher and now as a parent of young school-age children. As any educator has learned, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, children must have their basic needs met before they can access education and learning. First, their physiological needs must be fulfilled, and then their sense of security in their homes, communities, and their schools. There are many children that do not feel safe in the presence of firearms, and firearms can even be triggering for some children. Children deserve to feel safe at school and be able to learn without fear. And I speak to you as a person who has guns in their household, locked away. My children know about guns, and I am still in opposition to them having them in their schools. As a teacher, I was faced with angry parents, unauthorized parents trying to pick children up from school, and other contentious moments that would have all been escalated and much scarier had those parents been allowed to have firearms on school premises. Our teachers have enough on their plates without having to worry about firearms being allowed in schools. The answer to violence and the atrocities that are happening in schools around the country is not to arm teachers and staff, but to address the mental health crisis first and foremost. While I personally believe that guns do not belong in our schools, I do understand that different communities have different needs and values. That being said, I believe this issue is best left to the individual counties and local school district to make the decisions that are right for their communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Slater. Who do we have next? That's everybody? I still have more people on my list, but they're just not, okay. All right, we're now 13 minutes ahead of schedule. So with that, we will close public comment. 2 days of public comment, I think, is sufficient on this House bill. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Okay, it's been moved by Senator Kolb. Do we have a healthy stack of amendments? Anyone? Senator Crago?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We should all have a copy of an amendment I had drafted up by our good staff. Essentially, this amendment just provides, and I'll read it, it says, and it puts in paragraph 9 under subsection T 68104T, no person authorized to carry a concealed weapon pursuant to paragraphs A2 through 4 of this section shall carry a concealed firearm into any elementary or secondary school facility if the person is enrolled as a student at any elementary or secondary school. This is the identical language from last year's bill that I think we all thought was a suitable solution to the question that's been raised by a lot of folks here today. And so I just brought back the same language that was in last year's bill. And I did visit with the sponsor a little bit about it, and I think we're okay moving forward with this.
So Senator Crago, this would be governed when the person goes to apply for the permit, right? Is that so? Or would they, I'm thinking of this in the opposite of the other amendment that we had, where when you're applying for the permit, you would prove that you're graduated from a school. In this scenario, when is it applied?
So you would still be eligible to go apply for a permit under the statute. You just would not be able to pack it into a school of which you are a student, a secondary or elementary school. Won't apply to the college setting, but it would apply to our high schools. That's the main thing we're talking about. And so it does not prevent you from getting a permit, right? So under this current statute, you can get a permit if you're 18, but it's under exceptional circumstances. You have to apply through your local sheriff, et cetera. This doesn't touch any of that. This just says if you're still a member of a school, that you cannot carry into that school using this particular bill we're trying to pass.
So walk me through how that's enforced then. If you're in a small rural school and it's your own school, the staff know you. So that would be kind of obvious. But if you're going to a school that you're not enrolled in, how is that enforced? How would staff know that that's a student at a school? At first, they see a person, they get a glance at the gun, they understand the person's carrying, they look like they're younger, maybe they could possibly be a high school student, so they stop them and they ask them, are you a high school student? Is that it?
I think it's that simple. It's the same. I mean, they may not know if they're a high school student or not. There's another hole in this bill that we talked about last week, which is it doesn't allow folks from other states who have a valid permit to pack into our schools. And so that's the same circumstance. How do we regulate that? I don't think we do. But this is our attempt to at least fix the problem. And hopefully your sheriff would notify the 18-year-old when they go to apply for a permit, hey, if you're still in school, please know that you can't pack into a school with the permit. I mean, that would be the idea, is our local law enforcement folks would educate the 18 to 20-year-olds when they go to apply for the permit.
Other discussions on this amendment? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that amendment has been adopted.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Crum.
Yes, I'd propose an amendment. It's really just a clarifying amendment, cleaning up some verbiage on, it would be page 4, line 5. In there right now, and really starting on line 4, it says facilities that would not allow them, or it says are licensed by the Department of Family Services. We have some facilities that would be licensed, but they're state-owned facilities. So the state doesn't license themselves. So this language, my proposed amendment would be before the word license on page 4 would just be to add exempt from licensing, and then the word or licensed to that. And it's just a clarifying language to bring in things that would be on this, but they're just not because the state doesn't license itself.
Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Could you list all the places that this would apply to?
Senator Crum.
Where would apply that, where I'm really aiming is at daycares. The University of Wyoming has a daycare, Casper College does an LCCC. There may be others out there that applies to, and this relates, other licensed daycares in the state are exempt, and this would be allow those daycares that are owned by the state that would be licensed to not be licensed to be included in this.
All right, any other discussion on this amendment? More discussion, sure. Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be a no on this. I'd like to explain why. I think it's if we're going to go down this road with this kind of logic, then the whole reason for this bill goes out the door. The reason we're talking about this is because there's vulnerable people that are not going to be protected by a sign outside the door that says don't come in here, and don't harm people. And folks that would do this don't care about the sign. I don't really see the difference here. I think you're making a bunch of victims out of this, of the most vulnerable amongst us. And I just don't see the reason that we would do this, because concealed carry person, if on the alignment of the stars, you have somebody who's there for some reason who has a concealed carry that stops a bad man with a gun. The only person that can do that is a good man. So I don't know what protecting those groups of folks is really getting us. So that's my reason for not supporting this amendment, and I do respect my colleague. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Crum.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to change the intent of the bill in any way, shape, or form here. I'm just trying to clarify. It looks like to me 3 daycares that got exempt that would be included in this if they were licensed in some form. It's not trying to in any way change the form of this bill in any shape or manner. It's just closing a loophole that it's out there. It's just doing clarifying language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on this amendment? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Oh.
Mr. Chairman?
All right, let's do that again. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, that amendment has been adopted. Got the right, got the left. Other amendments? Senator Hicks.
Page 8, line 8. This is a cleanup. We just need to strike the word or entity. And the reason is because it's already in the same sentence. And so we've got it in there twice. So go to page 8, let's start on line 7. No state agency, strike the word or entity, city, town, county, political subdivision, or other entity. So it's repetitive, it's a cleanup.
That's a good cleanup. Okay. Maybe Senator Crago?
Mr. Chairman, so I'm just curious if the second other entity on line 9 is talking about political subdivision. I know why this is in there, because we're defining university. We're making clear that this applies to the university, because the university, I don't think falls under it's listed as an entity within the bill. I'm not opposed to it. We just may want to make sure we're right when we get to the floor, but that the other language, city, town, county, political subdivision, or any other entity.
I think it's repetitive the way it's captured everybody.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure we're not exempting the university out by removing that. That's all.
Yeah, so the bill does use the language like on page 4, it says governmental entity. So it's using the language entity, that's only one spot I found it, but probably throughout.
Yeah, page 4 uses governmental entity.
But I think it's still covered by other entity.
That's the way I read it.
All right?
I think that's a
Well,
broad net, Mr. Chairman. Other entity.
any other entity. I feel comfortable with it, but I guess if we strike it out, our good office of attorneys will let us know if we mess something up, so hopefully they will. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment has been adopted. We had this amendment on airports, and I thought we were gonna get a new amendment.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Did anyone?
I've got a proposed draft, but rather than draft an amendment up, I think I'll probably do that as a committee of the whole, because I wanted to see if the bill was gonna pass before we started putting a whole bunch more amendments on it, so I'll try to bring something to that effect.
Maybe it won't pass, but for your amendment.
I doubt that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll watch for that one, Senator Hicks. Other amendments, Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other one, and I guess it's not necessarily cleanup, but we talked about this regarding biometric containers. So it's on page 4, and there's additional language on page 6, line 12 on page 6, line 20, page 4. And so what the bill says is prohibit a governmental entity from requiring an employee or student to store firearms within a concealed biometric container or locking container. And so my concern with that is, and especially in the one where we're talking about storage in dorms, is that storage in a container, i.e. with a key, and you just leave the key around, doesn't really get us to where I think the bill's trying to go. I think it's trying to make sure that it's safe and that only the actual person with the permit can access the box. And so I'd be more comfortable with language that just said concealed biometric container, which I think achieves the goal, what everybody's trying to do. I'm a little bit worried about or locking container on both of those. And the language on page 6 says or lock box. So my proposed amendment would be to strike the words or locking container on line 20, page 4, and or lockbox on page 12. Sorry, page 6, line 12, and strike the words or lockbox. So 3 words on each page.
What's the second page?
6, line 12, or lockbox.
Were you hired by the biometric container industry to bring that amendment?
No,
Sure
sir.
Sure does leave a lot of the lockbox community out.
Yeah.
Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify this a little bit, the NFA, so if you own a machine gun, you're not required to put it in a box that has a fingerprint access to it. What they specifically require is that you control access to said safe or said things that's stored in. So I don't know, I don't feel warm and fuzzy just about talking about a fingerprint biometric device that opens a box up, as opposed to somebody who's a responsible gun owner that puts it in a lockbox and keeps the key in a place where they know and they don't give the key to anyone else. I don't know if it really affords a lot of certainty that no one else is going to get in there. I mean, for all I know, you're going to wait till the person's knocked out at some party and stick their finger on there and open up the box. I mean, I think there's risks with everything. I just don't know if this is really improving it, besides if you own stock in biometric sealed lock boxes. So.
Senator Crum? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to come up. The only concern that I would have is as technology advances, that might be something that was really good this year and 3 years from now isn't, and we're coming back to correct our statutes to bring up to par with modern technology. So, I mean, I think it needs to be in a lockbox of some sort, and biometric probably today is one of the better. Okay, well then down the road, it might be something completely different. It might be facial recognition, or it might be I don't know. So just a thought that I think that we need to be careful we don't get too prescriptive. Yeah, retinal scan or, I mean, there's a lot of options out there. I just think if we get too prescriptive, we lock ourselves into a box.
Representative Haroldson, help me with like industry standard language. So because you've got locking container and then lock box. Does locking container literally mean I have a key and lock? And is lockbox broader, or are they both the same thing?
Thank you, Mr. for that question, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, I could have my Pelican case with a combo lock on it. That would be a very safe and secure place for storing a firearm. It could be a situation where it could go into a desk-mounted biometric. It could go into, I mean, there's a million different options out there to store a firearm safely and effectively. And so it could be lock boxes, it could be lockable cases, it could be, so I don't know.
I just want to make the language consistent. Do you have a preference between the two, or?
I just think, I mean, in a way that you could lock that firearm, you'd have to come up with, I mean, there's a number of good lawyers on the committee that could probably come up with a language for that. I just think there has to be a lockable measure, which is the heart of our universities and mine as well, to just make sure that when these are being stored, they're stored in a locked way. And I think if we put too prescriptive of a language on it, we'll actually limit ourselves to technology not being able to advance past our statute. And we're going to be back addressing this down the road when something maybe better than biometrics comes down the road and is the go-to way of concealing a firearm. And at the same time, I mean, I've got very, very safe and secure lockable storage devices, but they're not biometric. But I feel they're very much would protect and be safe for those individuals. So, and the good senator did talk to me about this, and as I've thought about it over the weekend, I forgot to mention that coming back into it. But I think that if we're not careful, we'll paint ourselves into a corner on this.
Okay, Senator Kolb.
Just to add to that conversation, it involves combination locks. And I can assure you a combination lock that I've got on my gun safe is 1 hour manipulation proof on a class 1 lock. It's hard for me to get in there. So I think if that's a highly secure, I would argue more secure than a biometric type of locking device. And under that set of scenario, that scenario with the right kind of tumbler lock, not those push button electronic ones that are a totally different animal. But I don't know. I think being too prescriptive maybe is not the fight to fight right now. So.
Senator Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't disagree with what everyone has said. I'm just trying to find the right language, because as it's written now, a simple padlock with a simple key that you leave hanging on the door will meet the qualification of this statute if it passes. That's all I'm trying to prevent. And I don't think any of us are saying that's a good idea. I haven't heard one person say that is a good idea. I agree with everything else everyone else said, and maybe this is something we can work on, some language that meets everybody's criteria moving forward, because I'm just worried about the padlock with the key that you leave hanging on the door. That's not what we're trying to accomplish, and I don't think anyone else is. I get what you're saying, and I agree. If that's what it was and that was the prescriptive language, I'd be all for that. It doesn't have to be only biometric. I'm just trying to solve that one little piece, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the language between the two statutes is actually, or, sorry, between the two sections of the statute is actually pretty different. On page 6, it not only requires you to lock it, but it says that it must be within your direct control at all times. So I think that language is meant to obligate the person to control the key. On page 4, when not being carried on the employee or student's person, it doesn't have the same language. Senator Kolb?
Yeah, why wouldn't we just copy this language? Put it in the section?
Yeah, we're on the one amendment. If this amendment fails, I think we should make an amendment to make this language consistent. I think the language on page 6 is stronger.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to withdraw the amendment and work on something cleaner.
Okay, let's do that.
So
if you want to.
I withdraw the amendment.
All right. So Senator Kolb, would you agree the language on page 6, You want to move that language over?
I would, I'd make that amendment to move the language on page 6 over to whatever page we're on, what was that, Mr. Chairman?
So after container, it would,
Yeah,
we would
page
insert or lockbox within the direct control of the person at all times. And we would strike on page 4, line 20, or locking container.
Yeah, for consistency, Mr. Chairman, I think it gets to the point of direct control at all times.
Let's
which is
see
as
if
good
that,
as we can get.
let's see if that fits. Okay, so I think what we have right now is on page 4, line 20, after container, strike or locking container, and insert or lockbox within the direct control of the person at all times. And I think maybe you could put a comma at the end of that if you want to. I think so. I'm reading it just to make sure it flows. What do you think, Senator Craigo? It doesn't, the last part of the sentence is a little choppy, but.
Well, I think.
But the language from page 6 is definitely getting to the heart of the issue, that the person has an obligation to lock it and control that it's locked.
That actually, Mr. Chairman, is the language that the NFA uses for control over firearms.
Okay.
That's a very similar language.
All right, any discussion on this amendment? You good? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that amendment has been adopted.
Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
page 5, line 20. After the word employees, insert and volunteers.
You want an and or an or? Doesn't matter.
I don't think it makes a difference here. I think it's an and.
Okay.
I don't think you want it, it's not an or, it's definitely an and.
Okay. All right. And with the remainder of that paragraph, if you turn it over onto page 6, it says, any rules, the last sentence, adopted under this subsection shall apply to persons who are employees and volunteers.
Correct, Mr. Chairman, conforming amendment on line 5, after employees, insert and volunteers.
Mr. Chairman, maybe a
Yes.
friendly amendment. I think on that particular line, volunteers needs to go in front of employees, because volunteers are not defined in paragraph G. So I think it should say, should apply to persons who are volunteers or employees as
That's
defined.
Yeah, I agree.
The friendly amendment.
Yes, Pierre. Oh, yeah, I skipped over that.
An employee or a volunteer with a permit. Correct?
Yep. An employee or volunteer. Okay. Think we got them all?
I think that's got it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that amendment has been adopted. Any other amendments? Any discussion on this bill? Senator Crum, are you? Oh, your finger was just going towards the button, so I'm just making sure. Okay. Pierre, will you please do a roll call vote on House Bill 172?
Senator Crago,
Aye.
Senator Crum,
Aye.
Senator Hicks,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Olson.
Aye.
5 ayes do pass with amendments.
And Senator Steinmetz, are you carrying this on the floor, right? Okay. All right. That is it. We are adjourned.